Certainly did, and we're going to keep the action rolling here. It's a battle of the Americans. Mike Sigrist up against Tristan Wylde-Larue. Orzhov Venture. I don't think we've seen this yet on camera today, so looking forward to watching this one. Up against Mono White Aggro, the most popular deck from this weekend. What do you make of this matchup?
It doesn't feel good for Mono White, I gotta say. On the draw here, because they are up a game, but I know from watching this Orzhov Venture deck test that Mono White is a pretty good matchup for you, so you do feel good about this matchup despite being down a game if you're in Mike Sigrist's seat.
Oh yeah, because you got some behind the curtains look at the whole testing process with this Venture deck. So you got any more secrets you can spill for us?
Well, it's really good against runes. And
Okay.
I can safely say that when you see runes and mono white make up the biggest chunks of the metagame, the Orzhov Venture team is fairly happy about their deck choice for the weekend. Most off to a pretty good start for the team. And, you know, this deck plays out a lot more impressively than it looks at first glance.
Well, getting things off to a pretty decent start here. As gonna get 2 lands down here for Sigrist. Got both of his colors available. Would love to find that 3rd land on the other side of the battlefield. Tristan Wylde-Larue, who is up a game right now, gets a Fleeting Spirit down in the battlefield, and there's Triumphant Adventurer right on time. It's not
I will
land,
tell.
but this will do.
Yeah, I will tell you how they have said they lose the mono white matchup, and it is not making their land drops. So this is pretty
You
significant
don't say.
for Siggy to miss that 3rd land drop there, as now he's falling behind. And when you fall too behind to the mono white deck, it can sometimes be hard to get back into the game.
For sure. Triumphant Adventurer, with the rebalancing done to it, made it far more viable in this archetype, and it's such a fun card to play as well. Now, it's not going to be used to go on an adventure. It's going to block that Fleeting Spirit just to keep this battlefield clear. There is Faceless Haven number 2, an Elite Spellbinder. It's going to take a look-see here. And what would you pick here, Monty?
Probably the Meat Hook Massacre. Just make it far and away uncastable, and just make sure that for a while you are set against being able to play out your hand. The 3 drops, you could take either. Nadar will have more of an impact than Graveyard Trespasser in this game, but you know, in Tristan's position, you really don't want to get Meat Hook Massacred if you're playing out a board of Sigardian Evangels or the Intrepid Adversary.
Because they're quite tiny when it comes to toughness, but here we're going to see Precipitous Drop, Venture into a Dungeon, Lost Mine of Phandelver. The amount of times that this dungeon has been ventured into, it should be the Found Mine by this point, but you know, Khan will have it our way.
It'll be the Found Mine once we actually get through it. For now, Siggy has just begun to venture in there. So the Scry getting rid of a card, still not able to find a land, and there's not that much pressure on the other side, but Tristan's got one of the more mid-range hands of this mono white deck. We see the Wandering Emperor. We see Ao waiting in the wings. These are not the hands that you really want to face because it's a lot harder to stabilize against them. So this is the sort of game that is going to fall apart really quickly.
Yeah, not looking good here for Sigrist as Tristan Wylde-Larue just continues to push his advantage. Ao is playable this turn. Wandering Emperor can come out at instant speed, so yeah, the world's his oyster at this point. Sigrist really needs to draw a 3rd land. There it is.
3rd land there is. Could play Nadar this turn. You do get to venture further into the dungeon, make a goblin token to block that Sigardian Evangel if you want, or perhaps go for the treasure and give yourself that mana you need. But suddenly, by doing this, Wylde-Larue has the back-to-back 1-2 punch of the Wandering Emperor into Ao or Intrepid Adversary, and both are looking pretty rough for Mike Sigrist in this current spot.
And we'll say, though, if we go for the treasure token here, and there's no 4th land to come for Sigrist, he will be able to, you know, either run out the City Stalker Connoisseur, Wandering Emperor of his own, and also has Vanishing Verse deal with Ao, so that it doesn't have that death trigger.
Yeah, he does have the Vanishing Verse, that's huge, but Tristan is drawing all the good cards here, and Mike Sigrist is looking at this hand. It's decent, but at some point the game falls too far behind.
Yeah, it's not looking great still, as Ao the Dawn Sky is threatening to come on down. can't cast Intrepid Adversary as well as the Skyclave Apparition because Faceless Haven just really wants to be on the battlefield. So we're going to see a plus on the Wandering Emperor. The 3/3 now has First Strike. Oh, that was a 2/2 and a counter on it. So, yeah, things are looking not great here for Mike Sigrist.
Not great, but I think the fact that he got to keep the Nadar for a turn is actually pretty good because now he actually has the option to use the Vanishing Verse on the AO and maybe get in for an attack with the Nadar, venture a little deeper into the dungeon, and put some pressure on the Wandering Emperor. So this is actually not the worst sequence for Mike Sigrist, as it allows him to pressure this board, clean it up a bit, and maybe buy himself the time he needs to draw that fourth land.
Yeah, because these creatures are definitely going to want to try and keep the Wandering Emperor alive. Going to put a 1/1 counter on the Nadar.
Yeah,
so
you want to keep your Emperor alive.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the type of situation where suddenly things get awkward, and this is what this Venture deck is capable of, is putting up these sorts of plays thanks to the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Going into the storeroom there and getting that counter suddenly means that Tristan has no board other than the Wandering Emperor, and that feels better than what Mike Sigrist was looking at a turn ago.
Yeah, for sure. Just really, really needs a fourth land here. Graveyard Trespasser can pad his life total a little bit. As we're going to enter end step here. Aggro Mauling, I mean, it's technically a land. Maybe I should have specified. Untapped would have been nice. But
Untapped would have been nice. Graveyard Trespasser being able to come down is good. You do get to gain a life by getting rid of one of the infinite copies of Sigardian Evangel that has gone to the graveyard this game. Obviously, when they conjure those copies into your hand, if you don't play them, it's discarded, but it still exists. So it is fodder here for the Graveyard Trespasser in the upcoming turns, however many of those turns there may be.
So here we're going to see an Intrepid Adversary, just the one buff. That Anthem effect on the team, allowing every creature that is able to attack to swing in here. This poor little goblin is going to get thrown under the bus. And are we taking 7 here for Sigrist?
You're really tempted to trade off here as much as you don't want to. It feels like you have to because you do have these two Wandering Emperors in hand. You need to start picking this board off slowly. And you see Sigrist really prioritize getting this Vigilance creature off the board, as that's one that you can't hit with the Wandering Emperor. So it makes sense for him to play it the way he does, but the biggest route to victory here for Sigrist is lands, because that Meat Hook Massacre, it may cost more, but it's still there. So that is one way for him to stabilize this game.
Yeah, if he can get to 7 mana or find a way to kill the Intrepid Adversary, he'll be able to clear this entire battlefield down. That doesn't solve the problem of the Faceless Havens hanging out there. That he's going to need to find another answer for.
And you know, Sigrist is looking at the options. If he plays City Stalker Connoisseur, he's just dead to the board. So he has no out there. So what he has to hope for is for Wylde-Larue to attack with this Intrepid Adversary for him to be able to exile it and take the biggest chunk of power off the board.
Tristan's got almost an embarrassment of riches. Now, this isn't something you typically see with a mono-white deck. You know, after a point, it's just like, oh, top decking, hope you find something. But he's not running out of some things. He just draws gas each turn.
Yeah, not running out of some things is right. Able to activate a Faceless Haven, put a counter on that 3/3 Samurai token if he so wishes, or just leave up the Wandering Emperor activation. And Tristan's not falling for it. This Intrepid Adversary not attacking means that Mike Sigrist isn't able to remove that big of a chunk. Will be taking 11 here, but can choose to gain 2 life thanks to this Wandering Emperor. So he won't be dead.
Yep. Not out of it yet. It's gonna go down to 2, though. Let's see if Sigrist can find something to help him off the top of the library.
Yeah, and I love that counter positioning from Tristan, as it says, okay, if you Meat Hook Massacre me this turn for 2 and wipe all of my board except for a Faceless Haven, I'm going to be stalled out for a turn because Wandering Emperor can make a blocker. So I'll make sure Mitoc Massacre can't remove my Intrepid Adversary. And that ensures that Mike Sigrist isn't able to come back into this game thanks to the copy of Mitoc Massacre available there in the wings.
Yeah, so an excellent choice from Tristan Wylde-Larue, getting rid of that very early on. We're going to see the Emperor sacrifice herself to create that Samurai. Now, is there anything that Sigrist can do? I mean, you might as well play the land, see what's on top of the library. Just hope to survive. But it's not looking good here for Siggy.
If Wylde-Larue was to not attack with the Intrepid Adversary again, there is, and doesn't activate the Wandering Emperor, there is a series of plays that does keep Sigrist alive here. But I think doing the math, Wylde-Larue will know that this time, if he attacks with the Intrepid Adversary, it will be enough to close out the game.
This is such a tricky situation here for Sigrist. You could see him agonizing over this land because that would allow him to Mitoc Massacre for 3. So it's going to stay on top of the library. He just has to get to that point.
You have to keep it, but Sigrist knows that in this spot, his only hope is for Wylde-Larue to make a mistake here. And, you know, Tristan Wylde-Larue is an incredibly good player. He's currently tied for first in the non-league standings for the World Championship. So he's on his way there after a 11-4 performance at the last set championship. And I don't think he's going to miss this opportunity to get off to a 2-0 start at this set championship.
I'm with you on that one, Monty. So let's see if the Wandering Emperor, where that counter's going. It's going on the Samurai. Wandering Emperor on the other side of things can take care of one of these creatures, but it's not going to be enough to keep Mike Sigrist alive. 3/4/4 swinging on in, 2 life coming from the Wandering Emperor, exiling the Sigardian Evangel. But again, it's a little too late, unfortunately, for Sigrist.
Yeah, did the math. Either way, it was lethal, whether you attack with the adversary or not, as long as you put that counter on the Samurai. And no matter what Mike Sigrist does, it is lethal. So the mono white deck from Tristan Wylde-Larue taking that match down, and